You're welcome to my channel. Ajala Rosemary, the founder, Metalytics Insight Consult. Today, I'll be discussing on my video on knowledge gap will continue. So, I'll be giving you an example of how to write a knowledge gap for thesis and M.Sc dissertation. So, there is just a little difference between thesis and M.Sc dissertation. So, this video is a bit long, but it's something that is worth viewing. I just want you to calm down, listen to the video, then you apply the knowledge to your dissertation or your master, depending on the one or the program you are running now. So if you are ready, I'm ready. Let's go. Before I continue, please ensure you subscribe to my channel. Now, this video is going to be a bit practical. It's going to be a bit practical. Now, let's assume I have this topic to write on: gender stereotypes and career progression of women in banking sector, Nigeria and Ghana in perspective, meaning that I want to conduct a research by comparing this topic on Nigerian banking sector women and that of Ghana to see if there are differences between the way especially women are being treated in the banking sector, whether the way they are being treated in the banking sector actually affects their career progression or not. So that is the purpose of this study. So let's assume that we have that topic and we want to identify a knowledge gap. So that is the topic you have chosen. And you are looking at Nigeria and Ghana. So that's your own topic. So what you do next is to go into existing literature to conduct, literature on what, other people have done. So based on what other people have done, then you'll be able to understand or to detect or to determine whether you will be going ahead with this topic or not. I told you that sometimes the topic you are choosing might be reframed, might be restructured. It might not be the topic you will eventually end up writing on. The topic you are choosing is just, you are actually choosing an area of interest. But when you now go deep into the literature, that will now give you, you help you to determine whether you'll be able to, continue with that topic. Because in the existing study, someone else might have done this topic. Then what will I now be contributing newly into the existing study? What knowledge will I now be bringing to the existing study? So that is the reason for conducting extensive research review or conducting review of the existing study. Then by conducting extensive research, you can discern patterns in existing studies. Then consider what you can add to enhance the current body of knowledge. So let's look at the 5 papers reviewed below to see what they have done and their contribution. Please don't forget, for thesis, sometimes it depends, the number of empirical review you have to do will depend on on your college, or on your faculty, depend on the number of review you will be asked to do. We have some school that will ask you to do about 100 or about 200 or 300. At least for PhD, they require an extensive review for PhD from 200 upward. For masters, it's also going to be extensive, but they might limit the number of reviews for the master students. And for this study, I only I limited it to 5 reviews. So my knowledge gap is going to be based on these 5 reviews. So in your own case, if you are to review 200 papers, then your gap will be based on that 200 papers. So that is why when you first of all review, you come up with your review and you map it, then you start looking at each paper to see how it is different from the current study you want to do. So that is how to do it. So based on this study, now based on this video, now I only review 5, and I will be basing my knowledge gap on these 5 reviews. Now the first one is from the Yusuf 2014. The study looked at gender differentials and career advancement among academia in developing countries, Nigeria. That is the title of the study. Then the methodology. Let's look at the method that this study used in answering his questions and solving his problems. Now, the type of data used is primary data. The sample size is 160. Method of data collection, questionnaire and interview. Sampling technique was purposive. A method of analysis was chi-square. And the study found no statistical significant difference relationship between gender stereotypes and career advancement among women academics in Nigeria. Although the qualitative results found that certain organizational procedures and social factors could hinder career progression of women in academia. Now, what is the gap I found in this study? The gap I found is that this study is limited to Nigeria, and my own work is comparing Nigeria and Ghana. You can see the difference now, although the name of the university selected were not mentioned. So this study did not mention the universities they conducted research on. So for some study that will be looking at public sector, that will be looking at educational sector, maybe university, this is a gap for you. Then, however, this study okay, like for my own now, this study will focus on banking sector between Nigeria and Ghana. You can see that this study actually work on academia, some selected university, even though the number of university were not mentioned or the university used was not mentioned, but the study was carried out in Nigeria and it focuses on academia. Now, my own is focusing on Nigeria and Ghana, the banking sector in Nigeria and Ghana. It's not looking at banking sector in Nigeria alone, but it's looking at Nigeria and Ghana. That's what my own study is looking. You can see that what this person has done is different from what I want to do. That is the gap I have found in this study. So we'll move to the second one. Ukuta 2013 looked at gender and family structure on career progression of individuals in public audit firms in Nigeria. Let's look at the methodology. The type of data is primary data. Sample size is 123. Method of data collection is questionnaire. The sampling technique was not mentioned. Method of analysis were regression, t-test, and other diagnostics. Now, what was the findings? The finding is that gender and family structure promote auditors' competence, productivity, and dedication of auditors to duty as level of education of auditor matters in this respect. So what matters in promoting career progression for auditors is what is their education. It does not mean whether you are male or female. However, when they now look at the family structure, they discover that family structure affects women's career progression in Nigeria public audit firms, as marriage and motherhood are perceived to hinder commitment and advancement, contrasting with men's experiences where family roles often enhance their career status. Now, what is the gap, or what was the gap I found in the study? This study was done in Nigeria, and it was done in public audit firms. Though the study expanded the scope of the topic by including family structure. From the first, Yusuf didn't include family structure. That person included family structure into the relationship between gender and career progression. So it makes his work more distinct from that of Yusuf. But since this study focused on public audit firm, this present study, which is the one I want to do, will be focusing on banking sector in Nigeria and Ghana. You can see how my own work differs from what Ukuta 2013 has done. Although Ukuta actually expanded the scope by including family structure to see how it has how it's actually determine the career progression of auditors in in public audit firms. So my work, the topic I want to work on actually differs from that of Okuta also. So we move to the third paper, Learning Role and Learning Role 2017. The study look at the social cultural career progression barriers for women in academics, a case of the Federal College of Education or your special Nigeria. Now let's look at the data type, primary data, primary method of data collection. So the study used primary data, and the method of data collection is semi-structured interview and questionnaire, and also focus group. You can see this study used both quantitative and qualitative. The sampling technique was not mentioned. Method of analysis, narrative and thematic analysis. Well, the questionnaire included there might not really be for quantitative. Now, let's look at the findings. The study found that the socio-cultural roles of women as wives and mothers play a crucial role in their career progression as academics. So that was the finding of the study. Now, this study was conducted, the gap is that it was conducted at the Federal College of Education, Special Uyo, Nigeria. Specifically, women in academics were focused on. It further expanded the scope by looking at the sociocultural career progression. Now, this one now differs from that of Ukuta. Ukuta look at the family structure. This one is also looking at the sociocultural career progression barrier. So looking at how the social progression and cultural, how the social and cultural uh, factors actually affected or enhanced the academic progression of women. But in this study now, it was found that it actually uh, affected the women in academics. So it further expanded the scope by looking at the sociocultural career uh, progression for women, different from other studies. Yes. Now, your special is the public sector. So this study also look at public sector, educational sector. This study actually mentioned, where the research was conducted, different from that of Yusuf 2014. However, the present study, will be focusing on banking sector in both Nigeria and Ghana. So you can see how my work differs from that of Laniyo and Laniyo 2017. So we look at the fourth one, Akanji et al. 2024. This one look at the study title is Confronting Social Dominance Ideology, How Professional Women Manage Career Stereotypes in Male-Dominated Occupations, specifically banks. So this study, that's the title of the study. Now let's look at the methodology. The primary method, the type of data is primary. That's primary data. Method of data collection is interview. So the study used interview. The sample size is 30. Sampling technique is purposive. Method of data analysis is narrative analysis. So now let's look at the findings. The study found 3 strategies useful in managing gender and career stereotypes such as networking and support, emotional management, and deviance of stereotypes by demonstrating resilience. So these are the findings of the study, that actually the study has actually um, made up its mind that the gender stereotypes actually affected career development of women, especially in male-dominated occupation, specifically banks. Now it's trying to come up with methods or strategies for women in order to manage, this type of stereotypes. And the study mentioned networking and support, emotional management and defiance of stereotypes by demonstrating resilience. These are the strategies that these studies found or come up with to be able to manage this problem. Now, what is the gap in this study? This study was limited to the banking sector, although the number of banks branches visited and the location of the branch were not mentioned. However, since this study focused on Nigerian banking, this present study will be conducting a comparative analysis between Nigeria and Ghana banking sector. So that is the difference between my work and Akanji et al. Because Akanji et al. Is looking at the banking sector in Nigeria. But my own work is looking at Nigeria and Ghana, trying to look at comparative analysis, between the two country banking sector. That's what my own work. And apart from that, my own work is going to be quantitative. This work is what is qualitative because it makes use of narrative analysis, interview and make use of narrative analysis for uh, for the study. Now let's look at the fourth paper. For the fourth paper, Shao 2024, the study looked at the influence of gender stereotypes on women career development in Nigeria. Now, the methodology, types of data is secondary from previous publication. Method of analysis is narrative. Now, if you look at this study made use of a secondary information from the previous publication, and now based on it makes a narrative analysis. And what was the findings? The study revealed that gender stereotypes negatively impact women's career progression by influencing self-evaluation, recruitment opportunity, promotions, and confidence, which can limit their career development and mental well-being, applicable to contexts like Nigeria, where similar stereotypes persist. Now, this study, actually conducted an extensive review from the previous publication and from the findings of the previous publications. It was found that uh, gender stereotypes actually affected the career progression of women, especially when you are looking at the self evaluation in terms of recruitment opportunity. Male are more be favorable in getting work more than women. In terms of promotions, in terms of confidence, men are always look up to compared to women, and all this actually affected the career development and career and mental well-being of women. So all these are what this study found in the previous publications. Now, what is the gap in this study, compared to what I want to do? So this study was not empirical in nature, but based on the existing studies finding. So for you can actually use part of these studies, to do your background to the study. You know, it will give you a strong background to the study and part of your conceptual review. But it is different from my own, because what I want to do is to conduct a comparative analysis between Nigeria and Ghana banking sector to see how the gender stereotypes has actually affected the career progression of women. So now we have looked at the five papers, and we have been able to find that. Let's look at what we found out. Now, a closer look at this paper shows that studies have covered some aspects of banking sector, public educational sector, and audit firms. So these are the major findings. Specifically, now there are two papers that focus on academic environment. One at Federal College of Education, Oyo Special, and the second one did not mention its location. But we find two papers concentrating on academic environment. Then we also have one paper that focused on the banking sector, though the name of the banks and their geographical location were not mentioned. In Nigeria, yes, the study was carried on in Nigeria, but the name of the banks, definitely there will be selected banks were not mentioned in the study. And then the geographical location, is it in the north? Is it in the south? Is it in the west? Is it in the Abuja, that is the Federal Capital Territory? These were not mentioned, in the study. Now, we also have, there is also one paper that focused on the public audit firms in Nigeria, although the location was also not mentioned. Therefore, we have four papers that focuses on Nigeria, while the fifth paper didn't mention its location, and the paper was not empirical in nature as it was based on existing studies findings. So in all, three papers focused on public sector, audit firms and educational sector, while one paper focused on banking sector. Now, based on the review of the five papers on the impact of gender stereotypes on career progression of women in Nigeria, the following research gaps were identified. We a lot of from these five papers, a lot of gaps, knowledge gaps were found. Now, one, the manufacturing sector remains unexplored in existing study. Based on the five papers I reviewed, I discovered that manufacturing sector were not actually explored. Comparative analysis between different sectors were also lacking. There is also a gap in comparative studies between Nigeria banking sector and those of other countries, such as Ghana or Kenya or whatever, other countries. So, like my own eye is looking at Nigeria and Ghana. Another study can look at Nigeria and Kenya. It can look at Nigeria and what's it called? Nigeria and Ethiopia, Nigeria, and it can even look at Nigeria and developed country, maybe Nigeria and US. So it is a gap, different from the five reviews I have done. My analysis is based on the five reviews I have done. So then there's also a gap looking at the regional comparative analysis, particularly between selected private companies in different parts of Nigeria, south versus north or south versus east or north you know. Then we have sociocultural barriers to career progression for women in the public sector, including ministries and paramilitary services in southwestern Nigeria and other regions have not been adequately studied. Let's assume that I actually, reviewed 100 or 200 reviews. It's possible some of these gaps that I found might not be relevant. It is possible that other study will have done them. Now, specific states in Nigeria, such as Ekiti or Ogun, or uh, Oyo State, yeah, there's a study in Oyo State, or in Lagos State, or in Imo State, or we're in Imo State, or in River State or Cross River State have not been the focus of case study examining sociocultural career progression barriers for women in public service, among others. So all these are what are found. If you continue, you continue analyzing that five papers, there will be a lot of gap that will be identified. But I limited it to this number of gaps are found. Now, based on the uncovered areas, now research topic can be reframed to any of these, though not limited to the below listed topics. Sociocultural barriers to career progression for women in the public sector, a case study of ministries in southwestern Nigeria. The impact of gender stereotypes on career progression of women in selected manufacturing sector in Nigeria. Gender stereotypes and career progression of women in the banking sector, comparative study between Nigeria and Ghana, regional disparities in career progression for women in Nigeria's selected private university, a comparative study between the South and the North, the gender stereotypes and women career progression in public state service, a case study of Ekiti State. You can also have a case study of River State, you can have a case study of Cross River State, you can have a case study of Lagos State. So these are the way, now with these uncovered areas, now let's assume that I picked the third topic, gender stereotypes and career progression of women in the banking sector, comparative study between Nigeria and Ghana. So I picked the third one. And actually this third one is what my topic is actually looking at. Then what we need to do is that you need to break each concept into constructs. Now we have two concepts here. Gender stereotypes is one, career progression is second. So how can you break the gender stereotypes? You can break down the gender stereotype into many constructs. You can break down the career progression into many constructs. Now, for this study, what I will be looking at is for the gender stereotypes, I'll be looking at it from the social-cultural and organizational culture. There is a paper there, Okuta, that also look at the family structure. You can even include family structure into your gender stereotype to see uh, gender stereotypes from the social cultural, from the organizational structure, from family structure. You can look at it. Then the career progression. We can also look at it from the promotion, from the professional growth, from the career aspiration, even from the recruitment. From the recruitment, you can also look at it, you know, from recruitment. So, but for this study, I limited it to what? To social-cultural and organizational structure. In the existing study, I did not see organizational culture, but there is a family structure. There is social-cultural, but now I'm looking at Nigeria and Ghana. So, making my work differs from the existing study that I reviewed. Now, based on the reframed topic, I can write my knowledge gap like this, assuming the number of reviews to be conducted are 5. So now let's look at the way knowledge gap is written. Now, this is my knowledge gap. This is what you are going to have in your knowledge gap, that is uh, um, in your gap identification. Under gap, in thesis or M.Sc dissertation, we have two gaps that are majorly focused on: the problem gap and the problem gap and the knowledge gaps. Now we have discussed on the knowledge gap, on the problem gap. That is the statement of the problem. Now this one is knowledge gap. This is how to write it. This is how to write it. In this study now, we're having four knowledge gaps. Now let's look at what I've written down. The following lacunas. Now when you are writing, lacuna, missing pieces, missing piece or lacunas, you can call it lacuna. It is a problem, that were uncovered, or the following uncovered areas, or the following lacuna, were found in the existing literature, which further require further investigation to enable this study contribute new insights into the existing literature. Number one, based on the reviewed literature, this study identifies a depth of research focusing on socio-cultural gender stereotypes and their effect on career progression of women in the banking sectors of Nigeria and Ghana. Existing studies such as that of Akade et al. 2014 focus solely on the Nigerian banking sector without a comparative analysis with Ghana. Similarly, Laniran and Laniran 2017, which examined socio-cultural career barriers for women, concentrated on the public education sector and not on the banking sector. Therefore, the study will examine the effect of socio-cultural gender stereotypes on the career progression of women in the banking sectors of both Nigeria and Ghana. That is my first gap. That is my first knowledge gap. The second one is that, furthermore, the literature review reviewed limited research on the impact of organizational culture on the career progression of women in the banking sector, particularly in Nigeria and Ghana. Consequently, this study will also examine the effect of organizational culture on the career progression of women in the banking sectors of Nigeria and Ghana, respectively. If you look at the 5 reviews I did, none of them actually look at organizational structure. They looked at socio-cultural and that of family structure. But my study is looking at organizational structure, different from that of Ukuta. And Ukuta actually focused on the public audit firms. But my work is looking at organizational structure and banking sector, looking at Nigeria and Ghana. Now, due to these gaps, especially in the gap 1 and gap 2, due to this gap, this study observed a lack of research on the significant differences between socio-cultural gender stereotypes and their effect on the career progression of women in the banking sectors of Nigeria and Ghana. As such, this study will examine the significant differences between the two countries' banking sectors in this regard. So the study will be looking at the significant differences between Nigeria and Ghana banking sector in regards to that of the title of the topic. Now, the last one is, likewise, a lack of research was found regarding the significant differences in the impact of organizational culture on the career progression of women between the banking sectors of Nigeria and that of Ghana. Consequently, this study will also examine the significant differences in organizational culture and its impact on women's career progression between the two countries' banking sectors. So now, if you look at this gap, I have 4 gaps already in the existing literature. So then let's look at how it can be translated into research questions. Although we have some school of thought that said that after you have found your gaps, the next is objective of the study. But for me, I will be going with the school of thought that says you follow after your gap identification, then you go to your research questions. So I move to my research questions. Now, from the above gaps identified, from the gap that I've identified above, now you can write out the research questions. Number one, what are the effects of sociocultural factors related to gender stereotypes on career progression of women in selected country banking sectors? Number two, how does organizational culture influenced by gender stereotypes affect the career progression of women in selected countries banking sector? Are there significant differences in the sociocultural impact of gender stereotypes on career progression among women in different selected countries banking sector? And the last one are there significant differences in the organizational structure, organizational culture of gender stereotypes? Sorry, are there significant differences in organizational culture impact of gender stereotype on career progression among women in different selected countries banking sector? So if you look at my identify knowledge gap, there are four. My research questions are also four. So let's look at the research objectives. So the specific research objectives are the following. Number one, the specific objective of this study are to examine the effect of sociocultural factors related to gender stereotypes on the career progression of women in selected countries banking sector. Second one is to investigate the impact of organizational culture influenced by gender stereotypes on the career progression of women in selected country banking sector. The third one is to compare the sociocultural impact of gender stereotypes on career progression among women in different selected countries banking sector. The fourth one is to compare the organizational impact of gender stereotypes on career progression among women in different selected country banking sector. So my specific objectives are also four. So if you are to also state your hypothesis, your research hypothesis must also be four. So let's look at it. So based on the research questions and objective of this study, the following hypotheses are proposed. The first one, sociocultural factor related to gender stereotypes have no significant impact on the career progression of women in selected country banking sector. Yeah, this research hypothesis are stated in null form, and that is why it is like this. It is stated in null form. If it is stated in the other way around, you state the null and you state the alternate. But I only focus on the null hypothesis. Then the second one is that organizational culture influenced by gender stereotypes has no significant impact on the career progression of women in selected countries banking sector. The third one is that there are no significant differences in the sociocultural impact of gender stereotypes on career progression among women in different selected countries banking sector. And the fourth one is there are no significant differences in the organizational cultural impact of gender stereotypes on career progression among women in different selected country banking sector. So you can see how I started from the topic I picked. Now, but then from going into the literature, reviewing five papers. Based on the five papers, I try to reframe my topic, though the topic I picked actually come up. The topic I picked has actually, created a gap already. Sometimes your topic, if you frame your topic very well, you will have created a gap for yourself. But it is necessary for you to go deep into literature, also to actually, observe and also to determine if it has been done or not. Let's assume that topic has been done. Let's assume it has been done. Definitely, I will have to, move away from that topic. Maybe I will be looking at the manufacturing sector, or maybe I will be looking at Ekiti State, or Imo State, or Lagos State, or maybe I will be focusing on ministries or paramilitary, sector, or something else. If it has been picked or if it has been well researched upon in the existing literature, but The way I frame that topic, it has not. Then I go into literature. Based on that five empirical review that I did, I come up with some insight, on how to reframe the topic. I come up with some gaps. Then from it, I was able to, the constructs. I was able to break down that concept, the gender stereotypes and the career progression. I break them down into different constructs to enable me to be able to come up with gap. Then from the gap I identified, I was able to come up with research questions, research objective, specific objectives, and research hypothesis. So sometimes when your supervisor continue to cancel your studies or your gap, you know, this is what they normally look at. Once your gap identified does not go with your research questions and does not go with your specific objective and hypothesis, they will cancel it. They will tell you you don't know what you are doing. They will not even tell you what to go and do. You will go and do something again that is wrong. You bring it, and as a result of that, you continue to waste your time. You continue to waste your time. You know, sometimes we have some students that will be spending 4, 5, 6 years just because they are running a PhD program or M.Sc program. Once your topic does not align with your gap, and your gap does not align with your research questions, objectives, and hypotheses, it is likely for you to spend more than 3 years, running that program. But once you're able to identify your gap and you align it with your research questions, objectives, and hypotheses, you have actually solved 70% of the research work. You have actually solved it because based on your gap identified and your research objectives, you'll be able to develop your methodology. You'll be able to quickly develop your method. Once you have this, you can easily develop your methodology. That means how to design, the way you are to answer your research questions and solve your identified problem. Thank you for listening. Next lecture will be on how to conduct literature review. Thank you for listening. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you and God bless.